Well, what happens if you've got a field that can't be reached by that canal? And here's a case where the farm has dug a small canal from the main one back here to get some water. But there's about 60 acres up over a hill, and they're missing a pump here, but they're going to pump this water up over the hill, and we've got to have rice production over there. Otherwise, they can't produce it without the water. But the problem is that the electrical pump is broken, and the engine, and there's no way to get it repaired or fixed. What does that mean? And suddenly it's a big factory for them. Now, on the other side, when they're trying to control the erosion, there are ways of doing it. Now, the first trip there wasn't this way. But the second trip, while they're starting to plant corn on a contour like this, there's places along here where it catches the water, and there's soybeans growing on the ridges. That water moves laterally slowly, then it finally comes out. And that's one way that they can control the flooding problems with terracing. Alternatively, on these hills that have been bare, they like to plant trees. And one of the more popular ones is fruit trees, particularly apples, pears, even cherries. And the problem, again, is that the fruit trees are spaced apart, and when it rains heavily, the water flows, and there's erosion. So what they try to do then is they come back in and they get the rootstocks, and they got a lot of them from Italy. They put the good North Korean science on it, get them so that the graft is fixed, that transplant them out there, but it doesn't do a very effective job of stopping erosion. So what we've been trying to do then is introduce some legumes and grasses that could be planted laterally across the flow, which would slow up the water movement, and if you leave a gap in there, the fruit trees can be placed between them. Now obviously they wouldn't be this close, but you could set it up in such a way that you can control the erosion, and those grasses could be hand harvested, which you're going to do anyway. They feed the rabbits and goats and other things, so they can have a livestock enterprise as well. And they're starting to look at those things very seriously. Over here is another set of terraces. This is a cornfield. Sometimes these are more than a 45-degree angle. But here's the terraces up here, here. But once it breaks through and you get too much water up above and it soaks in and breaks, then suddenly you've got all the water that lands here, plus the water that lands here, coming through. It comes over here and it breaks again, and it breaks again, and then pretty soon it's gone. It's all channeled out in one process. So the effectiveness of building terraces is very difficult because they have to be fairly close together, and they have to be constructed in a way that the soil will remain there and not be weakened. This is very expensive to do, and not anywhere near as effective as the other system. Rice, the mainstay crop. Now, when you start talking about rice, and it's part of the culture, it's something that's very, very critical to North things like it is in almost all ages. And they want to increase yield. Now, if the plant breeder goes out and he says, I want the highest yielding material, and he keeps selecting for the highest yielding material, it generally means that the growing season is going to be utilized more and more and more. In other words, it's going to be later and later maturing. And now with global climate change coming and early frosts and temperatures, that season is changing rapidly, and oftentimes they have difficulty in the fall because the grains can't fully develop. Now, the other thing that comes along with that is that there are ways that we can deal with some cover crops during the winter that will assist in soil development. But when the rice varieties are so long in maturity, you can't get another crop in instead of going to do the things we want to do in a short minute. Now, there are excellent varieties from China, but it's very difficult to get the seed. And seed production is a major issue. So they say, well, why don't we grow the seed on another farm and ship it over? There's a technology in producing the seed. There are transportation costs. There are other things that come with it that the infrastructure just can't handle real well. German NGOs are very active in producing seed and sharing the technologies for maize and rice production. And they're doing a great job south of Pyongyang, but the impact so far has been relatively small. Let's go on. I mentioned something about the maturity of rice. Now, there were some experiments that have been conducted on this, and they know that if you could only plant a crop after rice, now in this case it happens to be winter rye, You wait around and follow it through the winter, and then in the spring it's up about so high, you can follow that back under, and it adds organic matter. Now, organic matter keeps the soil particles apart, so that the water flows, there's much better aeration. And you can see the picture of the fellow on the other side. They ran this experiment for 4 years, and the rooting system of the rice was much better. Yields were almost 50% higher than without the crop in the winter and adding the organic matter down. And they take most of the rice straw off. I'll talk to you about that in a minute. But again, it's not possible now because the longer rice varieties are better, and there's no energy to use the machine to handle it. Instead, this time, when I looked around, there were very few tractors, and I saw more draft animals than I'd ever seen before. The energy and the machinery are going this way. We're away. And it's a very, very serious situation. The Swiss NGOs have taken a long-range plan on this. They are introducing forages, something close to my heart, and trying to understand the nutrition of these oxen so that they can start breeding oxen that are bigger. That's a long-term plan because they have more draft power if the oxen are larger and with better nutrition. I'm not sure. I just hope that we don't have to go that far, but at least it's a backup strategy. Main crops, of course, are rice, corn, wheat, soybean, various cabbages growing, and peppers inside. And they grow very nice. There's no problem at all with getting these crops to grow. The yellow crop off to the left is canola. They're interested in oilseeds and what they can do with oilseed crops. There's wheat in this particular field on the right. As an experimental line, there's some corn, there's potatoes. And a few years ago, they were interested in potatoes because there was a gap between the time that the rice was harvested and came around to feed the people. It would start to run out before the wheat was available. They plant potatoes and go again. There's things like that that have been done. Very difficult to do it again. I want to point out an example. They looked at the wheat, and they were interested in double cropping. And the question came up, we're going to harvest the wheat. What would be a good crop to plant that was still mature in the growing season that's left? I went out and I looked at the wheat, and I could sense the kernels had what we call a milk stage. They were not quite mature yet, and I could estimate how much longer it would take for them to get mature and how much time it would take for them to dry. So I didn't know when they were going to harvest it, and so I asked the farmer who would know, the farm manager, when will you harvest this wheat? He translated it. Question to him, and he reached in his pocket and got a little tablet, came back and answered June 26th. I was there in May, about the 24th, 25th. June 26th? Yes, it translated. June 26th, yes, June 26th. Later I learned that they have to keep copious records, and the recommendation from the top says that wheat should be ready to harvest on June 26th. If the yield is low, they come and say, when did you harvest your wheat? June 27th. Oh, you didn't follow the recommendation. So then pause. There's not very much flexibility at that time. I'll find out that in a few minutes again. So for sure, a big issue. Now, there's a factory that the Japanese built back in the 1930s that produces some fertilizer, but it's very inefficient in energy use. And it does not produce anywhere near enough. So there's two smaller factories that they use to produce fertilizer. But collectively, they produce about 30% of the needs for the country. So what do they have to do? And it's really laborious. They go out after the corn is harvested, cut all the stalks, bring them in. Out here, this animal eating a few. So out here, there's their animal and the trailer. They're pulling the stalks. In addition, people are out here walking, picking up the last leaves and few little bit of stalks that remain. And breaking them in. Everything. The sitting, this woman over here then grinds those stalks and makes them into not real short pieces, but shorter. And they're ground. The reason is that if you leave the stalks in the field with a climate, it takes 2 to 3 years for them to decay and return the nutrients back to the soil. If you grind them up and mix them with swine manure or chicken manure,